You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. On the show today, we have a huge Mets victory to discuss as they blew out the Yankees to completely sweep the Subway Series. All 4 games this year, won by your Mets. I'm going to talk about that in the first segment. Then in the second segment, I want to talk about who owns New York, how this has really changed throughout the season, and how the Mets just made a very good last impression on Juan Soto. So we'll go over that a little bit, as well as leading into the Braves series, set you up for what lies ahead in the final segment, as the Mets have a chance to not just beat the Braves in this series, but potentially take the lead in the wild card race. So we'll go through all of that. First, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at JustBaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, for those of you who've been tuning into the show this week, you know I'm out of town, and I have not been able to watch these games. I've had to just get by on game day because for whatever reason, I've been getting blacked out by MLB.TV, and so now, finally, it was a national game. So I didn't have to worry about that today, and I also had a day away from going to the amusement park, so I got to kick back and watch a Mets game, and it was a joy because I feel like I haven't watched one in a minute here. Obviously, there was a couple in Miami I caught after the All-Star break before I left on this trip, but it felt like even longer just between missing the last couple days and then the All-Star break before it, so I was all fired up to watch this game, and then first inning rolls around, I'm thinking maybe I should switch back to game day. Maybe I'm the jinx because the Mets go down in order against Garrett Cole. And then the first batter in the bottom of the first inning, Gleyber Torres, hits a home run on Sean Manaea. I got nervous. I did. It wasn't until we got to the third inning that I was brought to a little bit of ease because second inning, Jeff McNeil gets a home run robbed by Juan Soto, or at least a double. And I'm wondering, like, man, I mean, Jeff hit 2 home runs when I was in the building on Friday against the Marlins, but he's doing all this incredible stuff when I'm watching on game day. Maybe I should turn this thing off. But bottom of the third inning, Tyrone Taylor starts off what ended up being just a massive game from your fourth outfielder. He hits a solo home run to tie it. Juan Soto hits a home run in the bottom of the third inning, but the Mets were able to grab the lead back soon after that, and they never let go. Pete Alonso finally gets a big hit, hits a home run. His 20th of the season. He was sitting on 19 for a very long time. JD Martinez had led off the inning with a base hit. Alonso cashes him in. An inning later, Francisco Lindor hits a 2-run homer of his own. And at that point, the Mets just sort of cruised. It was nothing but enjoyable baseball after that. And Tyrone Taylor was the man standing on for Lindor's home run. Taylor had just a absolutely monster game. He hits the home run to get the Mets on the board early. He ends up going 3 for 5 with 3 runs scored, 2 RBIs. Makes a diving catch as well. That was awesome. And it's just, it shows you the ignitability of this team at times. Because, you know, Tyrone Taylor, you look at his numbers on the season, after having a monster game, he still has a 675 OPS. He's not great. But at the same time, there's a reason why David Stearns acquired this guy. Because the numbers overall for the season probably aren't going to be there year in, year out. He's never going to be a guy that you want to be your starter. But as a fourth outfielder, he gives you great defense at all 3 spots. He's so steady out there, has a strong arm, makes some spectacular catches, isn't going to drop anything. He's really good, and that just gives you a good baseline floor. And then he has the ability to have monster games. And you know, not to take a shot at Travis Jankowski, but as I was watching Taylor explode like this, I was just thinking about other fourth outfielders the Mets have had. And a guy like Jankowski, who, again, was part of a really good team. He was a good player, and he just won a World Series with the Rangers and was a big part of that team. So I'm not knocking him, but when would a Travis Jankowski hit a home run, go 3 for 5, do all of these things? So Tyrone Taylor being able to do that, it just everything right now, because we're so close to the deadline, is put in that context in my brain. And so I'm just trying to think about what this team needs. And when Jeff McNeil is clicking the way that he is, because look, in this game, Jeff McNeil wasn't great. I mean, 2 for 5, not bad. He scored 2 runs, but he narrowly missed a home run. He hit the ball in the air every single time, drove the baseball. I mean, if he played in that ballpark in Yankee Stadium, the guy might be a 20 home run hitter, honestly. I think he's probably mad at himself that he didn't get one out with that short porch. But when McNeil's clicking like this, when you have Iglesias who's so good defensively, always giving you something, goes on the broadcast and is commenting about what a great play by Mark Vientos, goes into the dugout, sings his hit, gives the people what they want. He's marketing that song beautifully on a national broadcast. But it's just the vibes are so good with this Mets team. I really don't know what they need. I really don't. Like when it comes to the position players, I feel like the Mets can stay internal and they just have enough guys. And when they're swinging the bat like this, it's just so fun to watch. So you go from the Lindor home run. The Mets tack on another run in the 6th inning, as I mentioned, to knock out Garrett Cole. Eventually get to the 8th inning, and the Mets just make it a rout. And I just love it for every single Mets fan that was in that Yankee Stadium that got to just enjoy it, revel in it, laugh in the face of the Yankees fans around them as they have become the Mets, right? That's always the thing. The Mets have to be this embarrassing team. The fan base is always frustrated with the New York Mets, and the media can always jump on them. Sports talk radio can always laugh at how embarrassing the Mets are. Well, there's now been a very large portion of this season here. You're talking about more than a month of time for the Mets. It's close to 2 months. The Yankees, I don't know if it's been quite that long that their slide's been happening, but the bottom line is there's been a very big chunk of this season now where the Yankees have been one of the worst teams in all of baseball, and the Mets have been one of the best. So that 8th inning just felt like cherry on top of the delicious sundae that is beating the New York Yankees as Mark Vientos leads it off with his 13th home run of the season. Jeff McNeil hits a double. Jose Iglesias gets a base hit. Alvarez unfortunately struck out. Tyrone Taylor doesn't make the same mistake. He puts the ball in play, tries to make something happen. Anthony Volpe comes home with it. Bad throw. That allows Jeff McNeil to score. Do you remember there's a part in the season where Francisco Lindor was slumping and people actually wanted to make the case that Anthony Volpe was as good or close to as good as Francisco Lindor? Yeah, no chance at that, because guess what happened next batter? Francisco Lindor hits a 3-run homer, makes it 11-2 for the New York Mets, and they end up scoring again that inning against Mark Vientos. At the very end of it, hit a sacrifice fly, so they hit around, and Vientos drives in the first run of the inning himself on a solo homer, and the last run of a 6-run rout with a sacrifice fly. Mixed in the middle there, you have a couple walks from Nimmo and Alonso and JD Martinez with a double. So everybody getting involved, and the bullpen was very solid in this game overall. Some of those innings after Manaea, the big out from Adam Ottavino, where Sean Manaea in the 5th inning loads the bases. Ottavino able to get the final out. He gets the win because of it. And you had Danny Young giving you a strong inning, and then Alex Young, newfound gem for the Mets, 2 scoreless innings. So that's the other thing when it comes to what the Mets need or don't need at the deadline. David Stearns, man, he's finding some guys that might be useful pieces. I honestly think if the Mets did not do a single thing, they could be a wild card team and they could make a run this year. And we'll get them. We'll talk about deadline more as we get closer to it. It's just at the forefront of the mind. But I don't see the win the World Series trade that's out there, and hopefully David Stearns finds it. But I see a team right now that just has incredible vibes. They're playing for each other, and it's all working. It's all working. I mean, here the bullpen never even made it a game, which is great. You always are worried with this Mets bullpen that they're going to let the other team back into it, and maybe that's just a testament to how bad the Yankees are playing. Not to mention, some of the home runs the Mets hit just pitches right down the pipe. The Yankees are not playing good baseball, so I'm not going to just say, hey, the Mets are the best team ever. And they just beat a great Yankees team that's however many games over 500, because, yeah, the Yankees are 60-44 after this loss, but they certainly aren't playing like a team that's 24 games over right now. They're just not. You look at the records and you think that, the Yankees should be the favorites. The Mets are playing much better baseball right now, and I want to talk about that a little bit in the next segment here, because this is the last time the Mets are going to see Juan Soto until he joins them next year. I want to talk about that a little bit, just how this season is going for the Mets, what the impression it could leave on other free agents moving forward, how this ship is heading in the right direction. So we'll talk about that as well as what lies ahead with the Atlanta Braves. All of that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, h-vac, and electrical supplies online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining Supply House's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/T-M and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And why wouldn't you want to go to a Mets game right now? You got the Braves coming into town for 4 games. Pack that ballpark. Get loud, get wild. This Mets team's good. And they have an opportunity, only a game and a half of the Braves, to jump them in the standings this weekend. So go show your support, be there for it, and Game Time's going to get you into the ballpark with the best possible deals. You can view your seat before you purchase, so you know exactly what to expect when it comes to the sightlines and everything else. You have all-in pricing up front, so there's no fees that are going to jump out to you at checkout. You're going to see exactly what the fees are and know what you're going to pay for those seats, and you can wait until just before the game, even an hour after the game starts, and find great deals at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, and you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. If you're an everyday listener of the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime some news breaks on the Mets. You can also ask me questions anytime, and you get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting 9 without having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, I know free agency is a long way away, and I don't want to skip ahead to it, right? Because this is a really fun season for the New York Mets, and there's a chance that this team can do something special this year. I'm not saying that they're going to win the World Series, but what I will say is anybody who makes the playoffs has a puncher's chance. And when you have a good lineup, which the Mets do, you got a puncher's chance. Now, you're going to need pitching to get there, and that's what we're going to have to find out between now and the end of the season. Will the Mets have enough pitching to not just make the playoffs? I think they're going to do that, but to actually make a run. But the bigger thing is this is going to be a year, I believe, where it's going to end on a solid note, whatever that note is. Yes, if you lose in the playoffs, it's never fun, but I think the perception of the Mets by the end of this season is going to be a lot better than it was, certainly after last year and for portions of this season. And that's important. That's not what's going to get Juan Soto to sign with the New York Mets. And the fact that the Mets beat up on the Yankees for 4 games, that's not going to do it either. But there are things that do get taken into account when you're a free agent, and the money's the biggest thing. So if the Mets submit the biggest offer to Juan Soto, good chance he's a Met. And that's on Steve Cohen, and that's up to David Stearns if whatever that number ends up climbing to get him, if that number is worth it. But there would be a world where if the Yankees had an unbelievable season, and look, they still can salvage this. I'm not saying the Yankees suck, and there's no chance that they're going to win this year. Actually, I will say the Yankees suck, but that's just a general phrase. The Yankees sucking. As far as their chances this year, yeah, they're still in the driver's seat to make the playoffs, and they still have, the best collection of 2 players that any team has. The Dodgers are close. When Betts is right and you have Betts and Ohtani, or just Ohtani and Freeman, they definitely have the best trio. But I think the best 1-2 punch in baseball is Soto and Judge, and those guys in a playoff series, they can do damage. But they can't do everything. And if you have a big 2 and a little 9, that's not going to work. So a lot needs to break right for the Yankees. They need to really find probably the right couple pieces at the deadline, and we'll see how it all ends up shaking out. But if the Yankees were playing the way they did for the first couple months of the season, the entire way through, and they had won 105 games, won the American League East, went into the playoffs, and went for a run once they got there, right? If all of that happened, even if they got bounced in the ALCS, Juan Soto is going to have a lot of fond memories of being a Yankee and wearing those pinstripes when he hits the market. And if the offers are close and he sets the record either way, because his contract must set a record, whether it's total guaranteed money, not likely. He's not going to top $700 million. If it's present day value total, that's possible. Whatever Ohtani's checked in at, 467 or whatever it was, getting over that. And for those of you who aren't aware, Shohei Ohtani took a ton of deferred money that brought down the present day value of his contract. So instead of $700 million, it's more worth whatever it was, 467. I don't remember the exact number. Somewhere below 500 million, but well above 400. So that's the number that I guarantee you that Scott Boras is going to push for to clear that. And I think it's probably going to be a present day money value contract of $500 million. So let's say the Yankees put that on the table, the Mets put that on the table. The Yankees put $500 million on the table exactly, and the Mets put $525. Okay, it's $25 million over however many years. Not the biggest difference. Same state, you're paying the same taxes, so it's just who do you want to play for? Do you want to play for the Yankees? Do you want to play for the Mets? Now, if the Yankees had a great season all the way through, I think he'd say, yeah, I want to sign up to be with this organization. Which organization do you have more faith in, honestly? Right now. Sure, I'm biased. I'm a Mets fan. So let's break it down this way. Which owner do you think is better? Steve Cohen or Hal Steinbrenner? You could say Steinbrenner, but you're lying. And look, people can have their gripes about Steve Cohen. Fine. Sure. Go with that. The guy invests in his team. He wants to win. As a fan, that's all you care about in ownership. So, as far as I'm concerned, who is the better owner? The New York Mets. All right, so who is the better president of baseball operations? Now, Brian Cashman is a Hall of Famer, probably. He's been great. And he's very defiant about how well their process is put in place, or how everything is done the right way, the Yankee way. How has that worked out for them since 2009? Because the last team to make the World Series in New York is the Mets. Now, look, the Yankees can still win the World Series this year and change my mind, but I don't believe wholeheartedly in the Yankees front office and how they do things. Yes, their farm system, always pretty solid. Luis Gil, great rookie pitcher that they developed. Aaron Judge, that they developed an MVP. But I look at David Stearns and the respect he has in the industry based on what he did in Milwaukee and how he took a Mets team that was at the brink this year. And whether it was him, whether it was Jose Iglesias, Francisco Lindor, OMG, or Grimace, the way this season has turned around, I promise you players are taking some notice of that. Oh, maybe it does feel different over there. And Juan Soto's watching the Mets destroy the Yankees today, seeing Francisco Lindor in the other dugout and how much fun those guys are having. I'm not saying he's ready to change jerseys. But what I am saying is at the end of this season, if the Mets are a playoff team, they lose in the wild card round, but they had a very respectable season. They somehow end up winning 90 games, which sounded crazy a couple months ago, but you never really know what could happen if they keep playing at this clip. And the Yankees, settle in and they find their way to 100 games anyway, right? That could still happen. But they lose in the playoffs. They lose in the ALCS. So the Yankees got further. They had the better record. But the Mets, from May 30th on, had the better record, had more fun, made the playoffs. Now you get two contract offers put in front of you. One's $525, one's $500. Which organization are you signing on with? Maybe the one that pays you more money? And the one that you know will consistently be able to put better players around you because of the owner's willingness to be a luxury tax team. The Yankees are doing it this year And they're already saying, well, we got to get out from under it. We can't pay this repeater tax. If the Mets were competing for championships every single year, Steve Cohen would pay whatever taxes. He would. He doesn't care. Now, does he want to? Does he want to always be that team? Not necessarily. He'd like to be able to have a team that's run well and doesn't need to be at that crazy threshold. He doesn't want a $350 million payroll every year. But when the opportunity calls for it, where that's the difference between being able to win a World Series and compete and not, if you have star players on your roster like Francisco Lindor, like Brandon Nimmo, and potentially like a Juan Soto next year, I think the Mets would do that. So, again, this is not just about Juan Soto. This same logic can apply to Corbin Burns, who knows and respects, I'm sure, David Stearns, considering all the time they spent together in Milwaukee, and now knows what he might be able to do with the resources of New York. The things that he probably didn't like about David Stearns, more related to ownership than David Stearns. Now ownership's not a problem. So I just say all of this because for all the people out there that wanted the Mets to tank this year so you can get more prospects, there's value in being a winning team. There is. And part of that value is you now get a chance to beat the Braves in a series this weekend potentially and move ahead of them in the standings. And who would have ever thought that was going to happen this year? So I want to talk about that next. I'll preview this upcoming series in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Booking.com, Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you've always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities. And right now I'm actually on a trip, not to see some baseball games, but as I've been telling you, I've been out in California doing some Disneyland stuff, and we had my sister and brother-in-law with us the last couple days, so we were staying at a very nice villa with multiple rooms where we could all be together. They went off and they went and did some Napa Valley stuff. They drove up California. My wife and I stayed behind for a couple more days here, and we got a more reasonable hotel for the two of us. All of it we got from Booking.com. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. So book today on Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You could turn $10 into $1,000. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week. From lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineups hit, or getting your entry fee back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that is code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Since May 30th, the New York Mets have a 31-15 record. Okay, that is playing at a .674 clip when it comes to their winning percentage. That is the best mark in baseball by a pretty wide margin. You have the Astros right behind them at 29-17. That's a .630 winning percentage. Below that, you had the Diamondbacks at 28-20. That's a .583 winning percentage. Where do you think the Braves stack up? You got to scroll all the way down, and you'll find the Atlanta Braves at the 18th best record since May 30th at 23-24. They have not been a great baseball team over this span. The Mets have been the best team in baseball. It's crazy to say that, but that's what's happened here. And I'm not saying that, hey, the Mets are definitely better than the Braves because they've been playing better lately. Look, you are what your record is. Ultimately, the Braves have been better this year, but only slightly. And now you have a chance to get ahead of them in the standings with this series. This is really important. Okay, this is a great opportunity for the New York Mets. And you might look at the pitching matchups and say, yeah, do the Mets really have an edge here? Are they going to be able to beat this Braves team? Because the Braves, they have one thing this year. They have great starting pitching. Okay, you have Chris Sale, who's been awesome this year. He's going to start the first game of this series. Max Fried, I believe, just got hurt, actually. Let me check on that, make sure I'm right. But I'm pretty sure, even though I've been away, I think I caught that one. Regardless, Max Fried has been very good this year, and Ronaldo Lopez has been just ridiculously good, converting into being a starting pitcher after being a reliever the last couple of years. So they have that, and they do have Sale and Lopez bookending this series. So you look at Game 1, you got Chris Sale versus Luis Severino. Game 4 of the series on Sunday, Ronaldo Lopez versus David Peterson. Sure, you can give the Braves an edge in both of those games, but what I will say is Severino has coming off a great start, has been very good this year. David Peterson has been great this year. Can the Mets win those games with the lineup that they have right now? Absolutely. You look at the games in the middle. Kodai Senga going to make its return on Friday night versus Charlie Morton, who's having a bit of a rough season. This might be the last we see of Charlie Morton. I don't know if we'll see him in another series this season, but I'm more just talking about this year. This is a guy that's getting close to the end of his career. Still can be effective. He's been good against the Mets in the past, but that's one game where theoretically you would like the Mets. The fact that it's Kodai Senga's first start back, I don't know exactly what to expect. And then this third game of the series, don't love it because there's a good chance that Tyler McGill is going to start in place of Christian Scott. Although I will let you all know, for those of you who didn't see the news today, Mets got a break with Christian Scott. No Tommy John right now. It's a rest and recover situation. We'll see what happens. I don't know if I should or if I would expect much of anything from him this year, because I think the Mets are going to play very cautious. So, yeah, in some world, you could see Christian Scott pitch in, I don't know, September if everything breaks right. But if I had to guess, they will be very careful with him. Once his arm is 100%, they might want to add a couple more innings on his season total. He cleared his innings from last year, but just barely. He's at, I think, just over 90 innings pitched. Last year it was just under 90. I think they'd like to get him some more starts if everything is good with that ligament and everything else. So it's a rest, rehab situation. Maybe you see him make a couple starts in Syracuse at the end of the year if they really want to, and he's feeling great. Maybe he's back with the Mets. If I had to guess, we're going to see Christian Scott get his shot next year, and hopefully that arm holds up. It's always a very scary situation when a pitcher has that type of an injury. Anything with the UCL, you got to be cautious with it. Hopefully this doesn't end up being something that comes in and ends up haunting the Mets in the future. For now, though, they dodged the bullet. So with that said, Tyler McGill will be back in the rotation. He's going up against Spencer Schwellenbach, who has been decent this year, 4.62 ERA. That's going to be an interesting game on Saturday. Could be a very pivotal swing game in the series, depending on what happens in these first two. If these teams split them, that game's going to be very important. But the bottom line here, if you look at the Mets and what has to happen this weekend, the bats need to hit. It's that simple. And what have they shown us that would make us doubt it, right? They're not playing the Marlins. The Marlins are the team that is the Mets' kryptonite for whatever reason. But now I feel foolish for reading into that series at all. And I don't think I went overboard with my doubt that crept in my mind. I had to listen back to those podcasts when the Mets lost those games to know for sure. But I believe I said something along the lines of, look, this offense has earned, earned the right to be patient and not freak out when they have a couple bad games. And sure enough, look at them come right here around against the Yankees and do what they had to do to get a big sweep. And now you look at what they've done coming out of the break. If you told me on Thursday last week that the Mets were going to win 4 of their first 6 games coming out of the break, I would have said, great. So they took 3 or 4 from the Marlins and split with the Yankees. No, that's not how it ended up shaking out. They split with the Marlins and they swept the Yankees. But you know what? That's a little bit better, okay? And now you get a chance to beat the Braves this weekend. And if you take 3 or 4 as you're sitting here a game and a half back, guess what happens? You move ahead. And you would hold on to the first wild card seed. And I did a show 2 weeks ago where the Mets were in playoff position. You can go back and listen to it. I said, all right, the Mets are in a playoff position. They're 5 games back of the Braves, I think, at the time. That's your next goal. And I think I even talked about this series. and how the Mets could gain a couple more games, get closer. Guess what? They're now right there. Right there. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see how this series ends up shaking out. But this Mets team has put themselves in a pretty awesome position, not just for the trade deadline, but just for a really fun finish for the last couple months here. And this series is a great example of that. There's going to be a ton of buzz and excitement in that ballpark. And you're not catching the Braves from last year or the ones from 2022. This is a different Braves team, a Braves team that has gone through a lot this season, a team that's probably sitting in a very interesting position themselves at this deadline. What do we do? Do we buy? How aggressively do we buy? Is this just a lost year? I mean, the Braves are asking themselves those questions because they lost Spencer Strider to Tommy John, and they lost Acuna to another ACL. So you lose a Cy Young potential guy, one of the favorites going into the season, and the reigning MVP. And yes, they still have enough pieces to win. Their rotation's still good. They still have a lot of stars in that lineup, but those stars haven't performed the way they did the last couple of years. So the Braves are sort of questioning things. If the Mets can win this series, that's going to impact, or could impact, what we see at the deadline. It might make them more desperate. They might not like what it feels like to lose to the Mets and be behind them in the standings. Maybe that pushes them more towards buying. And if that happens, that could just mean more prospects that don't haunt the Mets in the future. So it really is interesting how quickly narratives can change in a baseball season, particularly this time of year, where everyone's sort of trying to decide what they want to make of their season. But when you watch the Mets beat up on the Yankees on national television, it makes you dream big. So I will be very excited to watch the first game of this Mets vs. Braves series here. And I'll be back with another audio-only show. I think that'll be the last one of the week here. I'm flying back on Friday. So, yeah, one more audio-only show for you guys. I appreciate all of you who've tuned in this week while I've been gone. And like I said, I'll be back for everything as typically you are used to as we gear up for the last few days before the deadline. As always, make sure you follow, rate, review, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out Locked On Sports Today, which is streaming 24/7, giving you all the latest in the world of sports. You can also find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on Amazon Fire TV.